Okay, and good morning, and thank you for listening to Soul Talk. I have Carolyn Matthews on the line, and she wrote a book and did a lot of amazing research on mentoring the near-death experience for the NDE survivor. And I find this actually a great book because I know several people that have had near-death experiences, and they go through a tremendous amount after that experience. And Carolyn has put a course together to help people through this, and also help the professionals that might be mentoring them, helping them through their process. So good morning, Carolyn. How are you?
Good morning, Jeremy. I'm really fine. It's a beautiful sunny day here today.
Where are you at? You're in, is it Nova Scotia? Am I correct?
Yes, it is Nova Scotia, and we've been blessed. Everybody's having terrible weather, but I'm not complaining.
Well, you know, it's a little bit warm out here today in Florida, so I mean, that might not be too bad. To have a little
no, that's not too bad.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit. I know you went to Atlantic University, and this was kind of a research project for, I think, your master's program. Am I correct? Or
that's correct. I did my master's degree in transpersonal studies, and it was through that work that I actually came to realize the pressure that a lot of near-death experiences are under. You know, many of them know what the mission in life is, but many of them don't, and they feel this inner urge to know what it is they have to complete whilst they are in physical life.
Right.
In my book, I explain that near-death experiencers all say that they were sent back to physical life to complete their missions, which they have promised to do. And this is why it's so important for them to know what it is if they don't already know. Some of them do.
Yeah, there's something, like one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is that one of the big things that I know people that have had an NDE experience is their family members not understanding what they went through, and you talk about that actually based on your research. And you know, that's a consistent problem. I know a lot of people, you know, their spouses left them, their children stopped talking to them. It's pretty devastating for them that, you know, to have such a beautiful experience and then come back and not have the support that they need here. And
that's true. You're exactly right in what you say. Near-death experiences have been filled, in the positive near-death experience, they're filled with unconditional love. And they return to physical life still full of unconditional love, and they extend this to other people, which often those who are close to them don't fully understand. Not only that, the near-death experiences all say that their way of thinking, their attitude to life, everything's changed. Their whole concepts have changed. Well, no wonder. It's been a life-changing experience. And of course the thinking has changed, and family often find that difficult to adapt to. But I think one of the main problems is there just simply isn't enough guidance, or not guidance, but enough information out there for the general public. And I do believe that families of near-death experiences should be given more help in understanding what the near-death experience is and what this results in, you know, how this affects their loved one who's gone through a near-death experience.
Well, I think that the work that you've done here, honestly, is along the lines of like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her work with hospice. It's revolutionary because, you know, Moody did a lot of work on understanding the near-death experience and even bringing it to the forefront, and so did Dr. Atwater and stuff like that. But they, you know, you've brought something here to where it's really tangible that hospice workers and the counselors that help the family members and the near-death, the medical professionals, and now that would have to help mentor people through this process. And you know, and can you give some steps that maybe a healthcare professional that's listening could start looking for when they're talking to their patient that's gone through this?
I think the very first thing I would say is keep an open mind about everything. Never limit other people, never limit yourself. And yes, you can help. The near-death experiencer does require having the near-death experience validated. They need to be able to tell this to someone who will believe them. And of course, in my research, I found that they didn't always meet with this happy acceptance. Quite the opposite. Most people disbelieved them and were in denial about the whole thing. And some near-death experiences were told not to talk about it.
Yeah.
One lady that I had permission to quote, she said that she waited 50 years to find her mission in life, and also to have her experience validated. And she said that completely changed her life.
Yeah. I interviewed a gentleman that he had his in 1975. He was 15 years old, and he didn't start talking about it until the late 90s. And that's 20. He didn't even talk about it. Didn't even bring it up
No, I understand that.
And he was just so nervous. And I agree with you. I think where we're at is that there's just, and I would think this, it's been 30 some odd years, almost 40 years that the NDE phrase was coined. And you even stated in here that I think it's a Gallup poll, I think in the 90s, that I can't even remember how many people it said they had a near-death experience. I think it was like something like 20 million people said they had a near-death experience.
Well, yeah, that was quoted in my book, but I also added there's been more research done on that number, because I think the earlier Gallup poll showed only 8 million, so I believe it was 8. 8 to 22 is a big jump.
Yeah.
And there were two things. One was, are near-death experiences now coming forward and saying, yes, I had one? Or is it that the figures that Gallup quoted in his publication in 1990 represented incidents of near-death experiences, not the people who are having them? Because it's a fact that a near-death experience can have more than one experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, the fact remains that, the results are the same. There's a hell of a lot more people out there having near-death experiences than was realized. Millions of people in the States alone. And in other countries now, people are becoming more aware of it. The UK has done a 5-year clinical study. The Netherlands has done a study of near-death experiences from 10 different hospitals. I have even had interest shown in my book and my work from Australia. So people are sort of taking more notice of what's going on in this area.
Yeah, you're on the forefront of something. I think there's a lot of people out there. I mean, with the gentleman right now that's big in his experience, I mean, I think it's now starting to get very popularized, and hopefully that will help people, and not sensationalize it, but actually help people. Because I think that's a key thing is that we can sensationalize things and miss the actual help that people need. So
that's true.
So you did a pilot study that you talk about here in the book, and you got a lot of good feedback. It even seems like you even got a little bit of resistance from some people as I'm reading it through the modules.
Yes, I think this is also, you were asking about what would healthcare people, support people for near-death experiences like to know. The pilot study does show that. My pilot study was done over a couple of months with near-death experiencers who took the course which I had designed specially for them, and which is in the book, by the way.
Right.
They took the course, found their mission, 83% success with the pilot course alone, and I've improved the course since then. That's the one that I've added to the book. And I think the feedback is important. It's important to put in what didn't work as well as what did work, because that shows where you have room, where you have places where you can improve, which I have actually done. But it also shows anybody who wants to know about these, where they can maybe improve their own way of working as well.
Yeah.
And I think pilot courses, the pilot feedback, I think the feedback is important in that area. It's helpful.
Oh, that's a really good 83%. I've wrote courses for probably 15 years now, different types of courses, and I'm happy if I get 70 to 75%. on my pilots, because you always have room for growth. So are there other resources out there? I mean, I know that this pilot course out here. How is it doing? I mean, it's getting good feedback and it's going out to Australia, and stuff like that. But what are some, obviously, general practitioners and surgeons and psychotherapists and everybody out there can benefit from this? But what are some resources out there that if this course is not available in their area, what can they do to reach out there? I mean, I know there's the International Association of Near-Death Experiencers, and there's tons of books out there. But the person having the experience, obviously, they need to have an open mind to the people that are around them as well. But what are some other things you could give them that would help them?
To help the
experiencer,
the healthcare support systems?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in my own book, I have suggested 4 books that are good for starting off with. Of course, Raymond Moody's Life After Life. I think that was a good starter one for me. And Lessons from the Light by Kenneth Ring. I thought that would be good for anyone to read, if it knows nothing about it. It's good, it's general. Coming Back to Life, The After Effects of Near-Death Experience, which is P.M.H. Atwater's. I think that was her first book, 1988.
Yeah.
And that's written in a very informal way, but it does give good evidence of the difficulties and even the abuse that near-death experiencers go through as they try to readjust to life after their experience. And another excellent book is The Handbook of Near-Death Experiences, 30 Years of Investigation. And that's by Holden Grayson and Debbie James.
Yeah.
By Milner Holmberg, Bruce Grayson, Debbie James.
Yeah.
Those are, you'll find those actually in the text in my book. But, and of course, in my book, I give all the other sources that I used.
Yeah, I can't remember what page it's on. I actually read that because I read your book again about a week ago. Oh, it's on page 58 of your book.
Well done.
So there was a couple of quotes I actually highlighted in here, and one in your book I was reading it. One says, "For each soul enters with a mission, and even as Jesus, the great missionary, we all have a mission to perform." And I think you really expressed that one of the things and that's what this is really about, is addressing the need to find the mission in life, is and the people that have near-death experiences that I know, that was the one key thing, is they felt that they had a mission that they had to come back for, and they didn't, if they weren't grasping that or finding that, then they felt incomplete. And I think that's kind of what you're covering here is in this subject. And it seems like the pilot was very successful in finding that, because you use a lot of techniques like journaling and entering that stuff in. What was there challenges, obviously, during that process of having them do that in the pilot, or?
Yes. I use mostly transpersonal tools, as you've noted from the book.
Right.
But I did have to use some which weren't transpersonal as well. But the difficulties that I found were, for instance, I think one of the hardest questions I asked was, what are your ideals? And this was, I got this from the Association for Research and Enlightenment. It was Edgar Casey who said, if you're looking for your mission in life, search yourself. Search for what your ideals are on 3 levels, spiritual, mental, and physical. So now this question I asked my pilot course participants, and they had great difficulty describing their ideals. In fact, one lady left the course at this point saying, I can't get my head around the words, because in the near-death experience, I don't think words are necessary. The whole thing comes, any transmission of knowledge or communication is instantaneous, like telepathy sort of, but probably faster, a lot faster. So another lady said to me, I can't explain my ideals, so I'm going to paint them, which she did. She painted her spiritual ideal, And within that, she painted other things, and she explained to me how the other ideals, the symbols of the ideals in the painting, how they related to each other, and how they were all encompassed by the spiritual ideal. And I thought that was a wonderful way to do it. So I've included that as an update, in my course in the book. If you cannot use words which are geared to a physical world, then use pictures. Yeah. The subconscious thinks in pictures. It's the conscious mind that thinks in words. Well, usually the subconscious thinks in pictures. I must say in some of my dreams I've dreamt in words, but usually it's pictures. So that was one of the difficulties. It was a challenge. And I think it stemmed from the fact that the near-death experiencer had, during the experience, seen or experienced, shall we say, things that do not exist on Earth. Colors and different conditions. They couldn't describe it in words which could only describe what we see on Earth or experience on Earth.
Yep. That's actually. I'm glad you brought that up. That was going to be one of my next questions. Is most of them that I've talked to say, I can't put it into words. I mean, I can, but it's really not. Even the ones that could write it down or talk about it, they said even this limits it. And
yeah. Words are too limited. And
I believed them, but I didn't half believe them until I had what Moody would call a shared death experience with my mother that passed. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it parallels or relates, but I just know that the feeling, it's hard. I can describe it, but it's very hard to describe, and so it's more like a feeling that it's hard to describe. If you haven't had the experience, you haven't had it. So,
I think when you're explaining it in words, it's almost like you're dumbing it down.
Yeah.
The words don't do it justice.
Absolutely.
You can't actually explain the true essence of it in just words.
Yeah. Now here's another topic you cover in here, and it's about when they come out of this experience. Some of them, or even a significant amount of them, have their intuition kicks in. They have more lucid dreaming. Some of them, not all of them, do, but and that causes a lot of problems for them in a good portion of their life. One lady I know that she had an experience where she actually felt like she could hear the grass talking to her, and she went in, whether it was consciousness or whatnot, she went in to tell her husband, and her husband, he really wanted to have her committed, and that was a difficult situation. And then she was a school teacher at the same time. So, that brought a lot of problems because her senses were heightened. Is that pretty significant in a lot of the experiencers, that they experience a heightened state of consciousness, or what we would consider psyche?
Yeah, I'm sure sort of extrasensory perception is increased. If it, maybe they already had a high extrasensory perception level. Because some of these things may have existed before the near-death experience. I don't know. But about near-death experiences in general, yes, they do seem to be far more sensitive to their environment, to light, sounds, temperatures, as well as everything else. I'm sure you've probably met people who said, don't know why, but my watch runs slow. I have to keep fast-forwarding my watch. Etc. So there is a change in the biomagnetic or whatever you call it, electrical field, biomagnetic field of the person, of the individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people joke and say, "Stay away from my computer after you've had a near-death experience."
I've heard that. One person was forbidden to go into the bank.
Yeah, because they have so many problems with the computer. So. But in that case, it helps with their, I've found them, they've increased healing abilities, they've really been able to help people, if they can find that purpose and that balance. I mean, I had a friend, she was a student of mine, she had a near-death experience at 27, had a heart attack, she came back for her child, and she was miserable the entire time she was here, and it was hard to get her to adjust in this. I mean, it was the same things, and I didn't have this course back then to reference. And she ended up dying again at 28, and she didn't come back this time.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I mean, she went to a perfect place, and her daughter is fine, and the grandparents took over. But it's it was you could just see the pain on her face, because she said there's so much love over there, and the heaviness of this world almost it brought her to tears, and so it was hard for her to make that transition.
I understand that. I've seen that with some other near-death experiences. Yes.
Yeah.
Quite true.
I think that's actually.
I know you will.
Oh, sorry. Go.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I actually was trying to pick up on something you had just mentioned earlier, but it slipped my mind. It'll come back as we talk.
It'll come back. Sure. I think that's and what you're doing, and what I'm taking with this project with my show is I'm really just wanting to go into near-death experiences and that type of stuff, because I'm wanting to get the word out there and expand ideas, and as a result, I really think it's actually starting to heat up, because I met a girl that I'm interviewed in Portland. She's doing a documentary on what for the NDEs after life, basically once they've come back, in something similar to what you're doing here, and she's getting their experience so other people that have experienced that can, understand how they found peace in their life afterwards. After they've had their experience. So, I really think that the energy, whether it's consciousness or not, is pushing things towards more awareness in this. So I think we're on a good track as far as bringing that to people. So your website is ndemission.com. So for you guys that are out there, if you want to check out Carolyn's work, go to NDE, so near death, so it stands for Near Death Experience, mission.com. And of course, her book is on Amazon. And I'm pretty sure it's probably on Barnes & Noble and
.ca, Amazon.ca, yeah.
Yeah. So and then so what made you go into this study? I mean, obviously we know it's it was your research project and stuff like that, but or part of your master's degree. What made you pick this subject?
It was the last subject that I took, and the first subject I took when I went was learning to become a teacher of finding the mission in life. And my last subject was on the near-death experience and its survivors. It's almost as though the universe had planned it this way, and I had to fit everything else in between these two important subjects. But when I read, in my research, about the need of near-death experiences to find their mission in life, it was like a big whammy in the middle of my chest. And the light bulb, I had a light bulb moment, and I knew that that's what I was there for. I was there doing, because I just did the master's degree from interest, but now I had a purpose. I realized that the whole thing was building up to that, and I had no idea how I was going to address this problem, that finding the mission in life and near-death experiences. But I did know that I was going to do it. And I really had a lot of unseen guidance. I'd open books randomly and find the right passage there in front of me. I'd have a question in my mind, and suddenly into my mind popped the right book to find the answer, and so on. I had a lot of help and guidance, and I really hope that the work that I have done will provide or be a means for providing beneficial change in others, with stimulation towards greater awareness in this field.
Yeah, I think
I know. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, thank you. I know what I was going to say to you, and talking about the mission in life. I think everybody has a mission in life. And I don't think that near-death experiences have had, some people have said to me, have near-death experiences had a wake-up call about finding their mission? I don't think it's that at all. I think they've been reminded that they have got a mission, and through that mission they can now bring this greater awareness of a greater reality that they have experienced personally, and this unconditional love, and they can bring that into their mission. They can express and manifest that through their mission. They're sort of, it's almost as, I see them as light messengers, really. They're able to bring into their working life some essence, a subtle essence, which I think the world needs more of.
Yeah.
Quite frankly.
Yeah, it's like they kind of got a cosmic kick in the pants a little bit, but in a loving way. Yeah.
But I don't think it's just because of the mission. I think it's to say, look, you've been given through your experience, you've been given something special.
Yeah.
And you can manifest this special something through the work that you do in life. Go get your mission going, you know.
Well, you know, I'm glad you bring that up because another friend of mine, she's now 61, and she's had 4 near-death experiences in her life. But at 48, she had a massive heart attack, and she said to me, because I'm getting ready to turn 39 in March, and we were joking about it. She goes, "Are you starting to worry about getting close to 40?" And I was like, "No, not at all. I feel very young, actually." And she says to me, she goes, "It wasn't until 41 that it started to bother me." She goes, "But after my near-death experience, I was just happy about having another year and enjoying that, and then you just appreciate every moment." And now she's, you know, she's 61 years old, and she probably has more energy than most 20-year-olds, and it's
lucky thing.
Yeah, it's just because life has just gotten so exciting for her, as opposed to, you know, I think a lot of us we get caught up in life, and then we forget, and then I think the theme I'm seeing with a lot of the NDErs, the ones that had the positive experiences, they actually go and they stop and smell the roses, so to speak, and they try to take. At first, they're trying to just assimilate what's happening, and you know, you mentioned that in the book here, and I know a lot of other studies mention that it takes about 6 to 7 years for them to really process what happened to them and understand. I don't even think sometimes at the moment they even know what happened to them. They just know that they had this beautiful experience. And so, what do you? I know that's what we're kind of doing, is mentoring the near-death experience. But where do you go with that? I mean, is it? I'm sure sometimes it's more or less, but there are people out there struggling and they're trying to figure it out. Do you think that puts their mind at ease to know that it takes a certain amount of time to understand what they've gone through?
It might do. I was at one of the IONS conferences, you know, the International Association for Near-Death Experiences.
Uh-huh.
Near-Death Experience Studies.
Right.
And at one of the conference lunches there, I met a near-death experiencer who had his experience fairly recently, and he was still sort of thinking, he was still trying to come to terms with actually being back in physical life. But that's how it appeared to me. But he was very, very lucky in that he had with him his wife, who was understanding. She was, you know, I think she'd educated herself, or was educating herself about what was going on, and she was being very supportive. And I think that's so important. I wish that there was the health care and other support organizations put out courses for the families of near-death experiences, so that they too can adjust to the changes that they see in their family member. Because the family member isn't quite sure what to do with the changes, and of course they need help.
How beautiful is that she took that time to understand? That's really the strong love, you know.
Oh, yes, she had a lovely face too. You know, a light seemed to shine out of it. Absolutely.
Well, and then she got to she's getting to experience this because she's opened her mind. You know, she's getting to experience it on a different level. So that's great.
Oh yeah. She believed everything that she was told. I mean, a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
The lady who I mentioned earlier, who'd waited 50 years, she I think she was about 12 when she had her near-death experience. She was told never to talk about it again.
Wow.
And she didn't until she was searching, and she said late at night she came across my request on the internet for applicants for the course which I was giving as a student at that time, and she immediately applied. And I said, well, the course has already started. You know, you'll be a couple of weeks or a couple of modules behind the others, so I can take you if you don't mind working hard. And she said, no, of course I don't mind. And bless her heart, it's she herself has moved on, and she's doing wonderful things.
Awesome. That's beautiful.
50 years is a long time to wait.
Well, and there's the answer to you really helped somebody that, you know, they got to really get into their mission and free themselves of not saying anything, and that's amazing. So
it is. It's surprising. When I was at in Virginia Beach, I was presenting my thesis at that point, and a gentleman in the audience came up and spoke to me later on. He said, I was a child near-death experiencer, and he said, I always felt that I had a very close heart-to-heart connection with God, and I never spoke to anybody about it, none of my family. And he said, I'm married. I never told my wife about it until one day I met somebody else, and they were a child, you know, the other people were child experiencers. And he said, there's lots of them. And they all think that they have this special connection to God, and none of them realize that there are more than one. I thought that was very nice.
That's
he was so delighted to find that he wasn't the only one who'd had an experience as a child, but which he'd never told anyone about until he was into middle age.
Isn't that amazing how many you don't even know who you're touching in the audience, and then they come up and tell you at the very end, and you're like, yeah, I just touched somebody and helped them, or at least to help them talk about it. That's incredible. So there is six modules within the course. Am I correct?
Actually, no. There are 6 in the original, and I've added an extra one now.
That's right. I'm sorry.
So there are 7 altogether. And when I was presenting the course initially, I allowed a week for each module, but that wasn't enough time. And that remark was made in the feedback. We need more time. So now there are 7 modules, and if when I present now, I generally allow at least 10 days per module, and after that I start to say, haven't found your paper yet. But yes, I understand that, because many near-death experiences have health issues, which may have arisen from the near-death experience, or may have caused it. They have to deal with that. They have to deal with fitting their new concepts into their everyday life. There's such a lot of adjustment and change going on, and I don't think that anyone who's mentoring near-death experiences should rush them in any way.
Yeah, I think that's important, especially since we're talking about it's hard for them to even assimilate the words of how their experience is. You know, sometimes they need that time to process and go through whatever they've experienced, so they can address it. I think that's a very important point. So, so we're talking about we've talked a lot about the facts about near-death experience and the things that you've gone through. But you do touch on this people that had a negative experience. It's just a little bit in here. And how would you mentor somebody that's had that? And I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't studied a lot of the negative experiences, but I've heard about them. How would we mentor somebody that's gone through that?
I did mentor somebody, actually, even on the pilot course.
Yeah.
And I mentored that person. I mentored each one according to their needs. I was there on the one-on-one for each of them, and if anybody wanted to phone or whatever, I was there for them to just talk about what they wanted to talk about. The distressing near-death experience. This person took somewhat longer than the rest of the group to go through the course. There were more issues, and she just required more time. So that I allowed more time and dealt with everything as it came up as best as I could, and managed to have another successful pilot course participant, which I was pleased about. And I think I haven't done a lot of research on the distressing near-death experience. There are quite a few books out there where you can read about it, and the only thing that I did find when I was, just looking it up a little bit, because I'm interested in the distressing near-death experience. Why do some people have them? Why don't others? That I cannot remember the name of the man that I quoted in my book. He did say the distressing near-death experience is just the first stage of a full, true near-death experience. It's the first stage that every shaman or whatever, every shaman goes through when he's learning to be a shaman. He has to see the negative energy or whatever, the negativity, and learn to overcome this with his own strong and positive spirit. And then he becomes a qualified shaman. And perhaps the distressing near-death experience is something like that. You have to use this negative energy and learn that positive energy is stronger and can and will overcome it.
That kind of sounds like, and it's interesting you to talk about that, because it kind of sounds like Jung's shadow work, going into the shadow and understanding the shadow, that you have to go through that stage. Because I understand that, because in my studies of shamanism, you have to go through that stage, or they call it going into the underworld, to understand that negative aspect of things. So that's interesting you bring it in. The only reason, one of the reasons why I brought it up is because I did an interview about 3 weeks ago with a girl that died for 28 minutes and came back up. She was clinically dead for that amount of time, but there was a comment on the video that I posted, and it was from a woman, and for religious reasons, I'm just going to leave it at that. She thought it was because they had that experience because of demon possession, and she was asking me if I felt that was true, and I said I don't think that that's true. I think it's a part of their psyche that they're going through that maybe projects that into their experience. But I don't have a lot of study on it. I said that was just my hunch, and I didn't know what your research had given you. But that's a really good explanation from that gentleman. I'm gonna have to go and look at your resources in here and see if I can find that. So I really appreciate that. So, and I think
I'm just going through it myself to see if I can find it for you.
Yeah, and
I found it was quite interesting that everybody has to go through this. It's not just something that a few people go through. Everybody has to learn how to deal with the negative side, the negative energy. They have to learn how to deal with it and overcome it and project the positive energy so that nothing can interrupt that positive energy.
Yeah. There's another one, the life review. This gentleman's life review was he had 3 screens in front of him. The one was everything he had ever thought, or everything he ever did. The second one was everything he ever thought or felt. And the third one was whatever happened on the first 2, what it did to other people. So he had to look at that. And so I was thinking that in that case, that could be a negative experience for somebody, having to see things that they've done to other people or what they've caused in other people that maybe they were ignorant of in life or they didn't know, but they've had to face that, and that could be very not a pleasant experience. So it's just something, to ponder.
Well, it could be. I'm not sure about that because the near-death experiences that I've worked with, during their life review, they have seen the things that they did wrong.
Yeah.
What they judge themselves to have been, they judge themselves.
Absolutely.
They see what they did wrong and how that affected other people, and they felt the thoughts and the hurts of the other people, and when it got really difficult for them, the evolved being who was with them all the time and filling them with unconditional love would fill them with even more unconditional love and say the difficult parts that you don't like are the parts where you were learning, which I thought was very interesting.
That is
you
very
learn not to repeat that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But talking about the going back a bit to the distressing near-death experience, it was Christopher Bach, or Bash, I don't know how you pronounce it. His surname is B-A-C-H-E. He postulated that, he said that the distressing near-death experiences are just, he said, some of the deepest structures of the psyche are being met and experienced. And I've written here, he notes that these kinds of psychological structures are universally distributed among persons. So that is, essentially, we can all have them. And, or to put it another way, these deep structures of the psyche are available to all of us.
Right.
And it was this gentleman who said that they are a rather common feature of the mystic's journey. So, all right, so I can accept that. So that means in the mystic's journey in this sense, he has to face the negative forces in order to learn how to overcome them with the positive ones.
Yeah, I can accept that.
It's something which you see. You see this sort of story illustrated a lot in mythology and in cultures of all ages.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
I think it was Jung who discussed the mythological story of the hero's journey.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And we could parallel that in many, many, stories, and I think in Hercules' story, his journey of what he had to face and his opposition and stuff. I think it comes down to this too, is that it was distressing, but it comes down to another thought of Jung and even Freud's theories about facing your mirrors and or your projections and stuff like that, and looking at them and moving forward and growing your consciousness. So, I mean, we could really sit here and talk about this for a while, and I find it very interesting. So I'm gonna have to do some more research, and then maybe we'll talk about it again sometime. So that'll be awesome.
Well, first I'd like to just finish here with this subject a bit. Jung explained that the hero is the one who conquers the dragon and attains mastery of his conscious mind.
There you go. That is very interesting.
So, yeah, back to the research.
Interesting about him, he actually had, and I didn't know this until probably about 6 months ago, he had a near-death experience.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know that. And it's probably a good reason why he was such. They call him not only a psychologist or study of psychology. Some people call him a mystic. So, which is very interesting. So. Oh,
it is. I find it is very interesting. Yes, and I hope to do some more research later on, and certainly read some more of Jung.
Well, I think it's incredible. I love your work, and I love the fact that you went to, I don't know if you lived in Virginia Beach, but you went to Atlantic University, which I lived. I used to live a mile away from there, and I lived right on the ocean front. It was incredible there, and so it's beautiful, and that's a great place to go to. So where did
I went. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, because I can ask my question in a second.
Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to go, what's next? Like, where are we going from here? I mean, we've done this course, and where does your research go from here?
I am not sure where my research will take me next. I have quite a lot of other subjects I want to write about too, and have started writing about. I've got 3 books on the back burner, which have nothing to do with this, but I am very interested in the near-death experience. I'm very interested in trying to get the whole subject opened up in the field of medicine, in not just the healthcare support services, but I do believe that it's something that should be included in courses, certainly for nurses who are usually more open to, because, often it's a nurse that's with the patient when they revive, and I've spoken to different nurses, and they said, oh yes, and they don't talk about it, but they say, yes, I know about things like that. And I said, well, how do you know? And he said, well, I've sat with the patients. And they said, do you ever tell the doctors about it? And they said, no, not really, not often. Yeah. So the doctors perhaps need to be more aware of it too. People in the medical field need more, I don't know, just more exposure to this sort of knowledge.
I relate to you on that one. My mother was a nurse for over 30 years, and she experienced a lot. And she was a hospice nurse for, a good 8 years of those 30 years. And she actually saw people's spirits stand up outside of their body. And then she had an NDE from a heart attack. And then she passed about a year ago. And so, but hearing her talk, she's like, nurses have a finesse or a compassion that they're more open to that. And the doctors, because they're so scientific and clinical, it's hard for them to relate. But they're opening up too, because look at what's happening. There's doctors having near-death experiences and coming forward and talking about it. So
perhaps that's the necessary thing.
Absolutely. So there was a question I was going to ask you, and it slipped my mind, and so now I think it'll come back to me in a second. I was just going to say, we got some great content here that we've been talking about. Again, guys, it's the NDEmission.com. You can check out Carolyn's work, and you can also go and find her book on Amazon, as well as on Barnes & Noble, and I'm sure it's out there.
Actually, it's not on Barnes & Noble yet.
Oh, it's not on Barnes & Noble, okay.
I live in Canada. Barnes & Noble is an American organization. I would have to produce an American account to go on Barnes & Noble. I have an American bank account, believe it or not.
Oh.
But I am on Amazon.ca, which is the Canadian version of Amazon.com. And I shall probably get into Chapters Indigo. But eventually, I may get into Amazon.com. I don't know. It seems a lot of hoops to jump through when I'm on Amazon.ca. And even so, being on the Canadian site, I had an order. One of my first orders, actually, when my book went up on my own website, was from a large book company in Germany.
Wow!
And I thought, well, that's interesting.
That is very interesting. Well, this is a hot subject. I think we're right at the forefront of what your research and what you were wanting to do. Is I think the awareness is going to come out there. When you think about it's a fairly new study, and since people have been having near-death experiences for a very long time, but I think that Moody didn't start doing this until the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And I don't think there was a lot of research out there prior to that. There was it was touched on, but I don't think it was really researched. And then Outwater started really doing it, and different doctors out there started later on in the 80s. But it's just I think we're now getting to that point where it's that tipping point. At least that's my hunch. I could totally be wrong, but I'm hoping. So.
Well, I think it's becoming more widely discussed now, which I'm pleased about. Kubler-Ross was probably one of the earlier ones. Well, she was one of the earlier ones.
Yeah.
But in mythology, you can read of these things.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Too. And, I mentioned that a little bit in my book when I discussed some of the ancient Egyptian texts. Well, some of the ancient texts do discuss it. The ancient Greek culture have some as well. Was it the Greek? Yes.
Yeah.
The Corpus Hermeticum. I think it's probably been going on forever, but it's now all of a sudden, and I don't know why, it's almost as though so many more people are having this experience where perhaps once upon a time not that many, relatively speaking, did.
Yeah.
But now it's in the millions.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's just a lot of people talking about it. At least among their circles, people are, and they, for me, up until about a year ago, I probably had 10 to 12 people that have had a near-death experience, and that brings me to the question I wanted to ask you. Define near-death experience. I know we talk about it in the book, but could you define it for the listeners?
And a near-death experience is an event which occurs when an individual has been declared clinically dead. And clinically dead means no heartbeat, the brain has flatlined, so you've got no pulse, the pupils are dilating, and the body temperature cools. And after a period of minutes, hours, or in some cases days, the individual either is resuscitated or spontaneously revives.
Okay.
Now, despite the fact that doctors believe that the brain, if deprived of oxygen for more than 10 minutes, is irreparably damaged, near-death experiences come back into life with a very detailed description of what happened when they left their body, right up to the time and when they re-entered their physical body. And I think that this has caused some people in the medical field to question, to review their concepts of death.
Right.
So the near-death experience on leaving the body goes through the first phase, which is called the out-of-body experience. And this is fairly common. I knew about the out-of-body experience years and years and years ago. People would talk about it. And the individual sees themselves up above the physical body, looking down at it, able to understand everything that's said around, by the people around it, and see what's done and so on. They notice that they themselves have a more refined body. After they have been in the out-of-body awareness state for a while, they notice a darkness. Many of them talk about darkness, a void, and some talk about the dark tunnel. Through the darkness, they see a light to which they're attracted. As they move towards the light, it grows larger and brighter. And as they approach it, they see that the light emanates from an evolved being. And the evolved being is called different names depending on the beliefs of an individual or their cultural background. So it might be God, it might be Buddha, it might be Jesus, it might be an angel, archangel, but it's an evolved being who fills the individual near-death experiencer with unconditional love and continues to do that the entire time. So the near-death experiencers have said, some of them have said to me, I never wanted to leave this presence. I was home. And they of course do their life review. We've already discussed a little bit about that. And some of them go on to have other experiences, and they meet friends or relatives who are deceased. And the relatives and so on can give them, and do give them, messages for other relatives who are still living in the physical state about matters of which only they could know. The near-death experiencer doesn't know, but what this is all about, or didn't previously know what it was about, but carries a message back anyway. And at some point during the experience, because all experiences are unique and different, but all have similar core values which are recognized from the near-death experience event. So at some point they are told you do have to go back, you haven't yet completed the mission which you promised to undertake. Yeah. And many of them see what that mission is, oh yes, my son needs me, or whatever. Or, oh, my husband simply couldn't cope on his own, or whatever. Fathers realize that their children need their guidance, or will need their guidance when the child reaches teenage years. So they go back. But the ones who haven't recognized what their mission is, they come back thinking, why did I have to come back? It's painful for them to come back into their physical bodies, and the body feels very heavy to them. It's usually painful because the body is traumatized in some way of whatever caused the near-death experience, I imagine. But having come back, they then, of course, as we discussed, have to adjust, and then, if they don't already know it, they have to find what it is that they're supposed to do before they can again return to the light and the unconditional love.
Yeah. Very. Thank you. Thank you for that description. I think that will help people tremendously. And of course, for those of you listening out there, I would strongly urge you to get Mentoring the Near-Death Experience Survivor and Addressing the Need to Find the Mission in Life by Carolyn M. Matthews. And for those of you listening, thank you for listening to Soul Talk. And Carolyn, I just thank you for doing your work and blessing us with your research. And it's been incredible to have you on the show.
Well, thank you very, very much, Jeremy. Thank you for your work, too.
Thank you. Thank you. And you guys, thanks for listening. And we will be coming up with more episodes as we get them done. Thank you.